Hello and welcome to our discussion about the state of the industry. Today we have Nick from Object Matrix and Stefan from Vidispine.
Hello.
Hey.
So we're going to ask these guys a couple of questions and hopefully they'll tell us how things are working in the industry at the moment.
Super.
So first one on the board, are all creative organizations moving their workflows to the cloud?
The short answer is no. But what we currently see, or what we see, like in the last 10 years when we started our cloud journey with Vidispine, is yes, definitely more and more media and entertainment companies are moving workflows to the cloud. In the very beginning, it was mainly about just having compute power, maybe a bit of storage or databases in the cloud. But nowadays we also seeing things which just weren't possible years ago, like more and more post-production workflows going into the cloud. We see companies doing editing workflows in the browser or doing much more complex things which we just haven't seen before. And we also going into that direction with our product portfolio. So we have launched a product called VD Editor where you can do editing just in the browser. So you can edit content which is sitting on an S3 storage, for example, or in Object Matrix, of course. And you can do things which just weren't possible and people hadn't thought about it a few years ago. So yes, there are things moving, but at the same time, there are a lot of companies who just avoid the cloud at the moment or are very sensitive when it comes to the point where they should put their data outside of their premises. We have a lot of discussions with customers who are hesitant going into that direction. And so, yes, cloud will increase, but will be everything will be cloud in the future? I really have my doubts about that. And how about you, Nick?
Yeah, I think, I think obviously the last 2 years, we're getting onto that later, things have accelerated for a few people, but I think before the pandemic, the discussion around cloud was very sensible. There were certain workflows that were suited to the cloud, and certainly that remote editing piece is absolutely one of them, and collaboration. Having a render farm, renting one rather than building your own makes a lot of sense when it comes to that sort of thing. But there are also workflows that, the performance in comms isn't there today to do that. And then you have the company policies about where the data lives, sovereignty. And then you have on top of that, any sort of regional governmental issues that may stop you from using it completely. So I think people are moving cloudward. I'm not sure that they're all on the same journey and they're not all in the same pace for sure. And certainly some of the ones that went very quickly are now reassessing about what should be in the cloud and what should be on-prem or in a private cloud. I guess we have to define cloud as well. So yeah, I'm in agreement with Stefan. I think there are certainly workflows that are suited to it. Not everyone is rushing to it, but it's definitely a journey that people are investigating or are on.
So what workflows are successful using cloud services today then, Stefan?
Most of our customers are doing, on the one hand, media supply chain workflows, as we call them. Like they get content in, they do a bit of preparation or just transcoding, packaging it, and then pushing it out again, which is quite simple. There is no live production in it. There is no real post-production in it. It's in and out. And that's what we see for quite a while. And other customers are using it for archive purposes that, they, for whatever reason, want to store content in the cloud. And that's where we also share a lot of customers, I think, and that's why we're also here today. And nowadays, we also seeing customers who are very selective on which workflows they want to push into the cloud. maybe it's review and approval, where it's mainly about having one point of access for everyone. And that's pretty much it. Everything else stays on premise, while others really trying to have everything in the cloud. We have just won a huge tender where big sports broadcaster will go cloud only with most of their production. There are, of course, limits when it comes to live and studio production, but this will be really, they do everything which is possible today, and that's great to see. And yeah, we can hopefully share who is this and what's happening there within the next weeks.
Wow, yeah, okay. Congratulations on that, well deserved. And B, I think ultimately what it's been used for heavily the last couple of years is collaboration, whether that's review and approval, people accessing content. Certainly, if you look at the economics of archive, if you want to fire and forget your content, then public cloud makes a lot of sense. You hope you never have to touch it, and it's a very, very cheap platform. If you've got a workflow, sports, news, advertising, where you need frequent access to your archive, it makes less sense to only have that in public cloud. And that's where I think multi-cloud environments are coming into play. Certainly read a report today, I think it was from the IBC, talking about how people are looking at multi-cloud, not just because of the redundancy issues of a public cloud provider being offline, but also to suit the workflows. And I think that if you've got the requirement for frequent access to your archive, you need a platform that gives you instant access to everything with no egress fees. And if you need a safety backup, then absolutely, the very low cost, very cold tiers of storage in public cloud make a huge amount of sense. So I think that people are becoming slightly more aware and educated as to what platform is best. One shoe doesn't fit all in many circumstances. And I think that in this case, people are looking to see, okay, well, if I have my active archive in Matrix Store Cloud, for instance, just to pick one out of the many, but I put a safety copy in AWS Deep Glacier, then that's a good strategic thing to do, because you're not relying on one entity being up 100% of the time. And we're certainly seeing more organizations who've been affected by outages by the big three, looking at how they can spread the risk of not being able to access their content if they are 100% cloud.
So are you aware of any organizations truly adopting a multi-cloud approach at the moment, Nick?
Yes, there are. I think it tends to be the bigger entities. Certainly, when you look at sports associations in the US, when you look at large broadcast, if they tend to either have big corporate deals with at least one of the big three, whether that's Microsoft, Amazon, or Google. And typically they will deploy a multi-region approach with one of those, because they can afford to pay for 2 copies across 2 regions and all of the costs that incurs. So there are companies who are starting to look at that, who have had those outages. We ourselves have a customer in the ATP who use Matrix Store Cloud for their archive. ATP Media, use a Matrix Store Cloud for their archive. And they also use a public cloud provider for their deep archive in sort of insurance copies. So it makes a huge amount of sense to use the right platform for the requirements on the content and to ensure that your company can have access to that data, even if one service isn't available momentarily.
Did the pandemic change cloud adoption, do you think?
Undoubtedly, yes. For some organizations were probably already on the road to some form of cloud adoption. Others were probably in the plans of doing it. I think it did show a change of behavior for some organizations whose teams thought maybe things weren't possible to do in the cloud. No, you'll never do that. And by the very nature of necessity, they had to do it. It certainly changed attitudes towards that. I think it also had a bit of a negative effect in that some companies rushed into it without fully understanding the complexity and cost of implementing full cloud workflows in terms of DevOps, system integration, and obviously on sort of the cost of egress, etc. And also as we all opened up our networks so that people could access our content from on-prem and the cloud, then there are obviously been some rather large security issues happened around that. And that's certainly not cloud specific. A lot of organizations had security issues on-prem, large broadcasters being held by ransomware idiots who, because they opened up their networks, they're usually closed networks in the media area to enable people to access content from home. And then that caused breaches. So I think the pandemic highlighted that many organizations aren't ready to open up their networks yet, and don't have the appropriate technology to have immutable content, have audit and governance around their data. And for those who went into cloud, some of them maybe found that it's not the ideal scenario that it could have been. On the flip side, it has also been very beneficial for many people. And as we've experienced from our customer base taking up Matrix Store Cloud, that the need not to deploy something on-prem, the need to have a solution that is just there for you to use and be supported by a company has been very beneficial. Stefan, what have you seen specifically, I guess, in the regions you work in? And you only do a lot of work in the North America, which is definitely a more sort of cloud innovative space, I would say, versus what you're doing in Europe. Did you see a big difference between the two regions in terms of adoption the last 2 years?
Yeah, definitely. So talking about North America, people there are much more open to the cloud in general, and to adapt services and try out things, but also change things much faster than people do in Europe. Also, the customer base is different, that we have a lot of public broadcasters and public companies in Europe which are bound to tender processes and so on. So there is no really fast adaptation of cloud possible. So even when the pandemic started and people saw, it would be great to be in the cloud now because then we could change and be bigger and hire more servers. They just can't because of regulation and rules. And I think that's a very important component when people talk about cloud is a customer ready to go into the cloud from all aspects, not from the IT department is one thing, but is it really a company decision to go there? And we see this as the major, let's say, blocking item when someone is going to the cloud or not. Is it a company decision or not? That's basically the question. And the pandemic influenced this discussion. Yeah, of course, but I think in Europe it still needs some time that the adoption of cloud really goes to the roof.
Yeah, no, I definitely concur with that. I hadn't really pondered the whole RFP tender process that we do get encumbered with quite a bit in this side of the pond. It does slow innovation in some ways, that process, and typically, if we're being completely frank and honest with each other, sometimes those RFPs, shock horror, are written for a particular technology and therefore sometimes there isn't really a choice in what you can do from that. So yeah, interesting. And I think that's where, and I know, having sort of listened to a few podcasts around this recently, the big three sort of cloud providers are actively looking at what impact local governmental regulations have in each territory to impact their global services. And much like you, we have customers whose sovereignty says the data has to be in a certain place. Now, whether that's in France, in the UK, or whatever, that makes a big difference to the guarantees of what you can offer in the cloud, I think.
Yeah, definitely. But beside the world of our products, the pandemic really made much more use of the cloud. So I don't travel anymore because company restrictions don't allow it, but I'm still able to work. So there is definitely some advantage.
No, indeed. Yeah, definitely.
And talking about the pandemic, now we can't travel. Do you think trade shows are still going to go ahead in the future?
Well, yes, they will. Will they be the same is the question. I doubt it. I think there's a lot of pressure, not just from a travel point of view in terms of the cost and time being away, but also the environmental impact of hundreds of thousands of people traveling to a place and stuff being thrown away en masse at the end of a show. I think people need to speak to people and meet people, right? I mean, we've all done it. We've had nice times when we've traveled to Germany for well, especially on Valentine's Day, that was particularly nice to go to the user group meeting, and things like SVG, DPP, and HPA. I think they hold a huge amount of value because they're more curated, smaller events with a bit more sort of trusted content as to what's going on. I think NAB and IBC will certainly go ahead. They have a valuable place in our industry, but I just do not see the same amount of expenditure space being taken. I think that those events will need to be a lot smarter because ultimately building new relationships doesn't happen on Zoom. There's no way. You getting in touch with people these last 2 years with all of the digital noise has been very difficult. And of course, when we go to trade shows, we all arrange meetings because you don't rely on people walking by. But serendipity and people walking on your stand at the right time can and does generate revenue. And that can then lead to more revenue. So yes, they have a place. Will they be the same? No. That's the vote from Nick Pearce. And over to our friend in Germany.
Yeah, so I haven't been to a trade show for 2 years now. I think, Nick, you have been to one at least.
Yes,
What we miss and what also our customers are missing is the personal contact. It's not about seeing the latest and greatest features, software. That there are tons of tools how we can share our screen and present this stuff. But what's really missing is the personal contact. It's not, it's great to be at the booth, but what's really important at a trade show, I think, is what happens after this. Going out with people, having dinners, having drinks. That's where you have your personal relationships to others and you get the real news and you make the much more important context than you usually make during the day. So will trade shows stay? I think yes, but much more for the relationship part of the business, not so much for looking at screens together. I don't need to fly anywhere to look at the screen, but to meet someone, I think that's the difference.
Yeah, I think there's two things there. I think number one, on the technology piece, and we were coming to this point before the end of before the pandemic, where we were realizing that the ROI wasn't that great because the halls were getting bigger, the numbers were increasing, but they certainly weren't increasing down all the aisles. And every show you have to announce or release something. Well, it just doesn't work like that anymore. You end up sort of trying to be creative about what you're releasing for NAB or what you're releasing for IBC or Satis or SVG. And the reality is we've got, yes, we have rapid iterations of how we develop, but in terms of a strategic roadmap, it's typically a once a year or once or 18 months where we're developing something that's so key and everything else is point. So then you just have these little bits of sub-interesting conversations to have about what's new, whereas you're right, you could show that in any medium you want. And coming back to the people thing, obviously for me, IBC is NAB, the events I look forward to most is the 4K for charity run, because that's a good social thing to do with people and you get to meet lots of people. At IBC, it's drinking the terrible beer on your stand. However, coming and having the amazing coffee that you always have, and the Welsh evening that we have in our booth. And why? Because it's where people congregate and have more of an informal discussion and get to learn about each other more and have the real conversations, rather than one person demoing with a screen up there with 12 to 15 people behind them. Nobody can really hear you apart from the two people here. And yeah, as you mentioned, I went to a show. I went to Satis in Paris with Ivory. What a fantastic event. It just meeting people again, re-engaging, rebuilding relationships. In all honesty, had been tailing off over 2 years, because unless you're in people's faces, you don't exist, number one. And when you're a company, a small and medium-sized company, you can't build an ecosystem like, an Adobe Max or AWS Invent. So we have to work out different ways of reaching our audience, and one of those is absolutely in person. So yes, big fan of trade shows. I know that my LinkedIn posts that maybe don't come across that way, but I'm a big fan of effective trade shows that are short, sweet, and do focus more on the networking than the rest.
Yeah, agree. I'm a big fan of meeting people.
So Stefan, you mentioned the video editor works in the cloud, and Nick, you mentioned Matrix Store Cloud. How are these products working together to solve the customer's problems?
Well, I think that many of our shared customers and the customers we hope to work with together have some common problems. They have archives that they need to protect and access. And so certainly we have customers who have Matrix Store object storage on-prem and in the cloud, protecting that archive and the metadata and making sure it's available. But they obviously need to be able to access it on-prem and remotely. Certainly, the customers that who have very large archives are starting to build a silo of proxy content, so that proxy content can be viewed from anywhere. And certainly that we've been working together to enable our customers to play that proxy content, understand if that's what they need, they can use it if it's a certain format, and if they need the higher res, they can go to the deeper archive to pull it back. So we've done a lot of work together in our relationship to date. Certainly the last 3 or 4 years, we've been more tightly aligned on workflows that are supporting customer needs. And in terms of the interfaces that they're using, maybe Stefan, you can just explain some of the products in the suite that are sort of more relevant for that.
Yeah, I think the most important piece of technology for this is our streaming server called Vidispine. And what it basically does, it can read from Matrix Store and stream it in an MPEG stream, for example, into Video Editor. And so for the user, it doesn't make a difference if the proxy video is sitting on Matrix Store or another storage in the cloud or on-prem storage. They can just use it for editing. The other magic piece in there is that the streaming server can also play back complex timelines, including effects. So you can create wipes, dissolves, do voiceovers and everything, and have an editing experience just in the browser. And for people where this is not enough, they want to have the full editing experience, we also integrated it into Adobe Premiere. So you can work with Adobe Premiere on proxies sitting on Matrix Store. And I think that's something Mark wants to show to you.
Over to you, Mark.
Thank you very much. And here's my great demo. Okay, so let's do a quick demo for you guys of Matrix Store Cloud and some of the Matrix Store features. I'm not going to go into the admin tool too much, just to say that we have vaults and users, ACLs, powerful audits, and all the powerful analytics. But instead, I'm going to take you straight into our vision interface. Our vision interface is a view on our Matrix Store. It's not a database. It is purely pulling all the data straight out of Matrix Store. And as you can see, I've got on the left, my vaults I've got access to. In the center, I've got my assets. And on the right here, I've got this all important metadata. All this metadata, completely searchable, all vaults, current folders, extracted metadata. That's the stuff we've getting out of the system, you know, all the headers, XMP info, AS11, AS10, and the CPL file info. But we've also got a fuzzy search, and new to Matrix Store Cloud fairly recently, the video login, the ability to actually tag the timeline with little bits of metadata as well. Super useful for using and finding and getting back to them shortly afterwards. As you've probably noticed, I've got plenty of videos in here for demo, and these videos are completely playable. I've got JKL support. I can flip between time format, speeds, scrub the timeline, etc. And also decide if I want to do something with it. So I can edit tags, add extra bits of metadata to it. As the presser a few buttons, I can play with metadata, copy and move it, get links, and those include public expiring links, the ability to just send the assets straight to someone who hasn't got access. And of course, all of these are covered by the ACLs as well. So only people with permission can do it. And those people who have got permission to do it also get given the audits to see what they've been up to as well. Of course, finding, browsing your active archive is really, really useful, but most of our users, they want to be able to edit the proxies directly from the archive as well. Whether they're in Matrix Store Cloud or Matrix Store On-Prem, they don't want to change the format and pass it up to something else. They just want to be able to find these assets and use them. And that's what we've done with our partners over at Vidispine, who've recently released their Vidi Edit product. We've dropped a few assets into the vault for them, and they are streaming these live to the tools that Stefan will show you now. If I hand over to you.
So yeah, thank you, Mark. And what we see here is our Vidi Editor product. It's a browser-based editor. It's made for journalists who want to produce content for social, for TV, for everything you want to do. It's not meant to be to make a full 90 minutes movie. It's meant to do news bits and pieces and social, as I said. So it works like most editing applications do work. You can create a project which is stored in our VD Core product, and you can access content. And in this scenario, we have connected a Matrix Store. So I see the same media like Mark has seen in his UI, and I have direct access to it. And when let's take a new piece of content in here, I can scrub through this very fast. And what happens in the back is that we don't move any proxy now. We stream directly into my client. So the magic piece in the puzzle here is our Vidistream product, which can natively stream from Matrix Store into Vidi Editor without moving any files. So the cool thing is you have full access to all your content. You can use everything for editing. So I like this piece of media, for example. It's blue. An endpoint in here. Out point, and I want to add it to the timeline. And there it is. Let's close this gap. And now I can play it back and see this wonderful edit I did. Beside that hard cut, we can also do effects like the dissolve we see in here. And that's one of the difference to some competitive products, that yeah, we can do effects in the video. We can do this without moving any files because we do all this in our streaming server product in the back end. And also what you need to do to produce content for social is graphics. And we can do motion graphic animations like the one you see in here. And when I play it back, you see it's a lower third, and I can directly edit it in here. So for example, I want to change the name, and I can see the result immediately in here. When I'm done with editing, I hit the publish button and can decide which format I want to render it. And we support all the broadcast formats, different proxy files, etc. And for this, we can pull out the high res from Matrix Store to do the rendering, or do rendering on proxy if you want to have it really fast. And that's like all the main features of our VD Editor product in a nutshell.
If anyone wants to get in touch to learn more about Matrix Store object storage on-prem or in the cloud, or if you'd like to get in touch with our friends from Vidispine regarding their amazing suite of applications, then the contact details will be on the screen in the credits. So it's a thank you very much and goodbye from me.
Thank you for the invitation, and yeah, see you somewhere, hopefully more near in the future.
Indeed.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us.